Hey, Allison Orthner here with Soul Art. Today's Soul Art project is on grief, and I have called it Dressed in Grief. And if I'm being honest, it is one that I hummed and hawed about doing online like this, because grief is so deep and so traumatic and so personal and so emotional that it is definitely one of the topics that I would prefer to be doing live with you, like one-on-one, so that we could be there to care and nurture each other. But I also know that there's a lot of people that are struggling through their own journey of grief right now that could use some positive, encouraging words and helping process through that grief. And so I decided to go forward with this, knowing that in real live workshops, I have a whole kind of a section on grief that I am saving for live workshops. But for this one today, again, it's called Dressed in Grief. And again, using just a piece of cardboard as our base and basic supplies. The grief I'm going to talk about today, though, is the grief of the loss of a loved one. And about almost 4 years ago now, that's when I entered the grief club, and I lost one of my best friends and soul sisters, Christy. And you've heard me talk about her, and I've shown you this before, but I'll show it to you again. Christy died suddenly of a heart attack, and she was 45. And she was not only a good friend, but she was one of our designers for Creative Scrapbooker magazine that we both worked for. So it was a loss to on so many levels. And I call it the grief club. That day I entered the grief club. It was a Sunday morning, and I was in church, and the sermon was on Psalm 23. And even if you're not a Christian or you're not a churchgoer, you probably know Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And it goes through and it talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And I remember sitting in the service thinking to myself, wow, I don't know what that valley of the shadow of death feels like. And within minutes, my phone was buzzing. Now, I looked down. I remember I looked down during the service, and I saw that there was a call from Christy. And I thought, oh, that's strange, because she knows I'm in church Sunday morning, so she usually wouldn't attempt to call me. And then my phone just kept buzzing, and there were more calls coming in. And but I waited until the service was over. But that is when, within minutes of the service ending, within minutes of hearing a sermon on Psalm 23 in the Valley of the Shadow of Death, I found out that my soul sister had died. But looking back on it, it was like such a gift that God gave me, that preparation, literally minutes leading up to the news. And there is hope, and that's my biggest message for this. There is hope to get through the journey of grief. And we have a special guest today that I interviewed that also has her own journey of grief. But before I show you my interview with her, we want to get started on this. So on your base, what you want to do is take a Sharpie. And I've seen this little diagram online. I wrote down, Dear God, and Amen. And the end of my prayer. I didn't write the prayer because I wanted to draw the prayer for you. When you are in grief, do you know what your prayers look like? That's what it looks like, because you are like pelting God. You're angry. You're hurt. You're in pain. You're at a loss for what to say. And this is what grief looks like. So I want you to draw that. And if you have not suffered grief, I trust that you have somebody close to you that has. And I encourage you to still do this project, because it will help you understand, help you walk beside them and journey with them through it. We have not learned well how to do that. We have not, as a society, especially in North America, learned how to grieve well. how to come alongside others who are grieving well. We get scared. We don't want to say the person's name. We just don't know how to respond. We put judgments on people that, oh my gosh, are you not over this yet? All kinds of things that are horrible, horrible. So we need to learn how to journey through grief ourselves, and then how to come alongside others to help. So the response prayer, dear Allison, this is God's talking to me. This is what I now know. He says, there. This is God's response. Dear Allison, I know. Okay. God is intimately acquainted with grief and sorrow. He knows. It's not a surprise to him what you're going through. I love you. If we can rest and find that place that even if we don't understand, we rest in knowing that God still is in control. And he does not need to give us a why. In fact, we will probably never get the whys for grief. He gives us glimpses, I believe, and he has been gracious in giving me some glimpses. But all I need to know is that he knows, he loves me. After you have kind of doodled and done some things, by the way, I'm going to write Christy's name on here. I also lost my best friend, Tammy, when I was 12. Heart attack as well. So I remember going through that grief journey. I think I slept on my parents' floor in their bedroom for about 3 weeks. That's how upset I was about that one too. But once you've kind of done some doodling and journaling on here, just to kind of begin to process it, I've just put some white gesso, added just a squirt of water in there to water it down. And now I'm going to cover my base with my gesso. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. And then we're going to let this dry when it's done. And meanwhile, what I want you to do is watch this interview that I did with my friend. Her name is Shirley Thiessen. And Shirley has her own amazing grief story to share that you will hear in the interview. And the whole reason that I chose, I'll finish this in a second, I just want to show you Shirley's book. It's called The Little Black Funeral Dress. And there are similarities in her and my grief journey, but very different still. But there was something that God did to prepare her for her grief journey that had to do with the dress, which led us to come up with the topic of dressed in grief. So watch Shirley and my discussion on her grief journey here.
Well, thank you. I want to just acknowledge that you are courageous for just opening up the conversation about grief and loss. And so I thank you for that, because as a society, yes, we have been very grief avoidant. Mm-hmm. And yet not one of us will get through life without experiencing a variety of losses, as you say.
But tell us a little bit then about your journey. And sure. I call it the Grief Club. Like, when did you join the Grief Club?
Well, let me take you to October 6th, 2012. And that was the day that our son, Jordan, was being married. So I remember thinking, I just can't wait to see this young couple start their life together.
How old was he?
He was 23.
20. Okay, that's the age of my boy right now. Justin is 23.
Yeah, it's a precious age. And he and his bride, Elise, had just graduated from university 6 months earlier. He had just landed a career job in Calgary. He had been looking anywhere in the country. And so we were so excited that they would be living in our city. And so it was just, everything was exciting. And so shortly after the wedding, Carrie and I went off to Palm Springs, where we have a little condo, and it's our tradition to go in October. And so we were down there, and about 4 days into the holiday, I decided to go shopping for a potato peeler for the condo. Okay. And I wanted to just get there and back, shop like a man, in and out, and be back at the pool in record time.
Yeah.
And as I walked into the store, I was quickly distracted by a rack of dresses on clearance.
Squirrel.
Yes,
I'm distracted by bling.
yes.
I get that.
Well, it's funny to me what attracted me. First of all, the sign said clearance, and
Yeah.
then among these flowery dresses was a black dress right in the middle that clearly didn't belong. But I went and had a look at this dress. I admired it. It was very soft fabric. It was well sewn. It was lined. I really liked the design, but I didn't need a black dress, and I wasn't there to buy a dress.
No, a
And
potato peeler.
yeah, I was there to buy a potato peeler. And so I put it back. And as I walked away, I heard these words: I want you to buy that black dress. You are going to a funeral. Well, my head snapped around to see who said that. There were people in the store, but no one was within close proximity to me. So confused, I started to walk away again. And this time I could read the words in my head like a ticker tape. And, I have heard God's whispers to my spirit. I have sensed his nudges, but there was nothing like this that was so direct. And before I knew it was happening, my feet were off to the change room. And soon I'm standing in front of this full-length mirror wearing the dress. And it hadn't even been my size, but as I put it on, it fit so well. It actually kind of felt like a hug. I was like, this is so comfortable. But again, I was thinking, what am I doing? I don't know anyone who has recently died. I have no funeral to attend. Besides, I already have a black dress in my closet.
And all you really needed was a potato peeler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ended up just buying the dress thinking, oh, well, whatever. Well, 2 hours later or so, back at the condo, suddenly there is a uniformed police officer standing at the door, calling out my husband's name. We invite him in, and he says, do you have a son living in Calgary, Alberta, Canada? Well, yes. Is his name Jordan Thiessen? Yes. And he just kind of thrust this piece of paper into my husband's hand and said, here's a number to Calgary Police Service. Call them immediately. I don't know what it's about. And honestly, I remember just feeling my feet were frozen to the floor. I couldn't hardly even breathe. Carrie was shaking so badly, my husband, that it took him several attempts to dial a number. And finally, he's connected to Sergeant McNaughton in Calgary. And so I still honestly couldn't think of what this was about. I thought maybe Jordan was in an accident, but why weren't they calling Elise? And it wasn't until Carrie finally grabbed his head with one hand and just cried out, "Not my son, not my son." And at that point, I knew our son had died. And Jordan had fallen 116 feet down an elevator shaft and died in a workplace accident. It took me a few moments before I connected the dots to that black dress, the one that I just bought hours earlier. And suddenly I knew exactly whose funeral I was destined to wear that dress to.
Wow.
And I felt like that dress that God had picked out for me to wear was his symbol to me that I know you're shocked, but I'm not shocked. I'm going to be with you on this grief journey. I'm going to walk every step. You are not alone. And honestly, that dress has been such a sign of God's love for me that it gave me courage to give a 23-minute tribute to my 23-year-old son on the day of his funeral.
You called it a hug. I call it a God kiss too, right? And it's such a powerful thing when you receive that from God, in spite of like the horror. And I honestly, I think that if I'm being honest, that would be my worst nightmare, is losing a child. I can't even hardly go there in my head.
Exactly.
I've lost my best friend Christy. I've lost family members, but I've not lost a child. And but to know, yeah, that dress, what a powerful symbol then for
Mm,
you from God.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I have the dress right here,
Let's see
and
it.
it's kind of hard to see. But the thing that really impacted me, besides the fact that God would choose my dress to wear, and honestly, this has been my weight loss program, is like, I have to fit
You
into
have
this
to.
dress forever because God picked it out. And so it's a lot of pressure.
Good motivation, though.
Oh, I know. But honestly, I'm getting fluffy around the middle, and it's like, I gotta work at that. But like the lining is this
Purple, beautiful.
beautiful purple. And
Hmm.
when it took me, actually, I didn't really notice it until after the funeral.
Hmm.
But it spoke to me that purple is a symbolic color of royalty.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I am the daughter of the King of Kings.
Hmm.
And so I thought, oh my goodness, Lord, you even thought to do this little detail that is so impactful to me. And so, yeah, the fact that God picked it out and he even made sure it was lined with this beautiful purple just for me,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. In our soul art, our symbol of being a princess and a daughter of God is a crown. So I often slip in little crowns, sometimes obvious, sometimes subtle, into the artwork just for that exact reason. Yeah,
and it's so important, right, to remember whose we belong to.
absolutely.
It
Well, so that leads me to how do you get through this? I know there's a part in your book that just resonated with me, and I tabbed it, and it's called, I labeled it, The Sound of Grief. And you write, I had no idea I was capable of the blood curdling sounds that came from deep within me. And that just is like, you sort of watch it on TV or you see it in movies, and as if you haven't gone through it, you're like, oh, is that really realistic? Like, would I really react that way? But I have myself experienced that, and I have heard somebody else going through grief, that it's a sound, like it's like wounded animal, and grief to me is one of the deepest, darkest, hardest things to get through, as I'm sure you can attest to. So what are your best tips and advice for the person that is in that place of grief?
Well, I think one of the things that I certainly, even though God showed me this amazing dress and gave me a symbol of his love and care, I did go through a period of what I call a crisis of faith,
Mm-hmm.
where I started blaming God, being angry at God, stopped talking to him, stopped reading his word. I just shut myself off.
Right.
And in very short order, I could see how bitterness was just taking such a hold.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, being a mom to Jordan and Chantel has been one of my greatest purposes in life. And I took so much joy in that. And by losing a child, I suddenly felt like, what's the point? Like, this boy was a lot of work, like a lot of prayer and effort and energy went into him. And now he's gone. Like, are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
But what God dropped into my heart when I started to open up to him again, and I mean, there's authentic lament that happens where you finally go, God, I'm just going to pour it all out. And so
Yeah.
I encourage anyone who is grieving, do not hold back. God can handle
Mm-hmm.
your anguish, your tears, your screaming, your words, but make sure you turn to him, not anyone else with that, and he can handle it. And we have to wrestle with not only him, but our tendency to doubt God's love for us when we're in so much pain.
Yeah, that is a huge one. Women that I have journeyed through, yeah, they're angry at God
Yeah.
when in pain. And that is so human nature, and that is so understandable. Yeah.
But I think we have to remember that we have, even though so much is wrong with our world, right? Because it's out of order, especially like I think of a child loss feels so completely out of
Yeah.
order. This is
Yeah.
not the way it's supposed to
No,
be.
it's not right. It's not.
No. And yet I can still worship what is good about God.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And to transcend those experiences and saying, God, I don't understand your plan. And honestly, if you conferred with me first, I would have talked you out of this, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But this is my reality. So what am I going to do with it? I am going to choose to trust you because you are my creator. You are the one who loves me. I am your child. I think so often when we're in pain, we tend to want to numb out on something, right?
Absolutely.
It can be even things that like overworking,
Yeah.
too much alcohol, too overindulgent.
Chocolate. Maybe just throw that out there. Chocolate works.
Chocolate of eternal perspective.
Mm.
And this is hard because when we just want to think about the immediate pain, but what helped me is thinking about my days with my son in heaven will far exceed the few days here on earth without him.
Mm-hmm.
And because of Jesus Christ, the best is yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
This world, we were told, will have trouble, but it is brief in compared to the inexpressible joy that we have to come.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if we really grapple that with our mind, it changes everything.
It changes everything. Yes.
It does.
That one I can attest to. And I remember after Christy passed too, I read another book that was I should have it with me, but I don't. But it was stories about near-death experiences and stuff. And it was such an encouragement to just have that affirmation again that this is not the end. And I know there are people that believe, when you die, you're dead. There's nothing there. In my mind, there's too much evidence that there is something there.
Oh,
And and so that to me, that eternal hope, like I don't know how you get to hope any other way than believing that you will one day, be reunited with your son.
Yeah, and God guarantees it. He said if we have a relationship with him, death is not the end. It's just a doorway from this reality to our new reality. And so keeping an eternal perspective is really, really important.
Right. I just wanted to close with this. Grieving is not an event. It's a lifetime of absorbing the reality of multiple losses. And you say, I wish there were shortcuts through grief I could share with you. There are none. And I always say we got to give space to it, kind of like what you're saying. You can't, if you shove things down, it is going to come out somehow, somewhere. So in appropriate ways, we need to definitely work through our grief. You say, I encourage you to do the hard work of grieving. Don't avoid the pain of loss. Allow yourself to feel it and to slowly reconcile to the reality of your grief. And be kind and patient with yourself. And finally, this is not a race.
Yes, because I used to think that there was a timeline to grief. Now, I don't know where you got that, but now I know that I will not fully heal until heaven.
No.
But and we need to be patient with others when you think, oh, it's been a year. How come you're still crying? Like people still hear that from their friends, and it just makes me so sad. We need to give each other space, and grief takes longer than any of us think is maybe even appropriate.
Yeah. And I think, again, maybe until your journey through it, you won't fully comprehend it, but it's good to know. And that's a really good way to help others. Like, do not judge. Do not judge somebody's grief, and do not judge them if they're laughing, right? Do not judge them if they're crying. Do not judge at all, because the grief journey is different. But I think everybody's grief journey is like you have that diagram. I had that in my journal too on grief. It's just
a plate of spaghetti. Like,
yes,
it's
and
not
no rhyme or reason. And you don't know when you're suddenly, like, I remember once I thought I was fine. I didn't even have Christy on my mind. And within seconds I saw something.
that she had created. And I was literally on the floor in the fetal position, rocking and crying. And I'm like, who are you? Right? It's such a journey.
Yeah.
And many have gone through it, and we need to talk about it more.
So, Shirley Thiessen, thank you for doing that with me. I wish I could have shown you all the entire thing. We talked for, I think it was close to an hour. But I do encourage you to get her book, The Little Black Funeral Dress, and read it. Because I wanted to include so much of our interview, I'm going to skip through a lot of the art stuff here and just kind of explain it. You've got on your sheet, you've got all of the how-to and the instructions. You don't even have to wait until your backdrop is dry with gesso, because gesso is just like paint anyways. I've got some black and some white. When mixed together is gray. And what I'm going to do is paint my background sort of dark on the left and moving to lighter on the right side. I have finished painting my base with black and white basically, and then mixed obviously makes the gray. What I wanted to do is on this side have it mostly black, and then up in this corner the source of light coming down. So again, just kind of play and smear and experiment. And while that's drying, I went ahead and I fussy cut my bodice out of the girl. I drew this, by the way. I'm going through another book helping me draw. It's not easy, but kind of like her now. So I fussy cut her out. And by the way, fussy cutting, these are like the best fussy cutting scissors. And fussy cutting just means that there's a little bit of intricate work that you're doing to, you know, cut around. And these cutter bee scissors are the best for fussy cutting. So it's worth an investment to have one of those. And then I fussy cut out my heart, which is going to go up in the corner. This is going to be like a balloon, kind of inspired by the Banksy picture. I don't know if you've ever seen the little girl standing there in a dress and she's releasing a red balloon. And it is on a mostly white background. We've added it a little bit more dark on ours. And then the crown, but I found another, I hoard crowns, I hoard birds, I hoard flowers, but I found a little gold crown for the from my napkin stash that I am going to place on her head. And again, that's symbolic to remind me of who and whose I am. As a daughter of God, I am a princess, and He loves me and He wants the best for me. And when I don't have any other answers for the why Christy passed, why my friend Tammy passed, for Shirley, why her son was killed, the only thing that we could land on to find peace for our souls is knowing that God's still in control. And so that's what that crown will represent. And if you can't say that in your life right now, that's okay. If you don't even believe in God, welcome to Soul Art. My prayer is that this is a safe place for you to wrestle through some questions, and especially with grief. People, like, what happens when you die? Those are big questions, and we want to create a safe place for you to journey through some of those questions and wrestle through, and most of all, love on you. So maybe your crown won't go on the head. Maybe your crown is going to go in her hand because you're not sure. Maybe you believe in God, but you are really angry at Him right now, and you don't know that He can be trusted, but you're kind of halfway and holding on. Maybe you don't include the crown at all. This is where it becomes personal to who you are and where you are in your soul journey. So, but it's there for you. The other one I have, it's there for you as well. So to create the dress though, and again, inspired by Shirley's story and the beautiful dress that God gifted her in preparation for the news of her son's death. That's how this sort of came together. The Little Black Funeral Dress book and Dressed in Grief. And what I have done is I've collected a bunch of kind of dark themed papers and napkins, and I even grabbed some purple for the royalty that Shirley spoke of. And then I found this is the leftover of the hymn book paper that Christy wrapped. The last gift she ever gave me was a Brene Brown book, which I love and treasure. And this art that I did in remembrance of her is from this collection. So I'm actually going to tear a few strips off of this very precious hymn paper and include it into my grief project here. And again, I'm the only one that knows that. Well, now you do, but it's things like that, bringing in heart and soul stuff into my art where an outsider wouldn't have a clue. They're just going to, oh, it's just hymn paper. But to me, it is a piece of Christy that will go into my art. And I love doing that. So basically what we're going to do is, you know, take pieces of your paper and your napkins and we're just going to tear strips. And as we're doing it, this represents torn dreams and torn hopes that have been torn out of our hands. Christy and I had so many dreams. We had so many dreams to still do together. We used to do Scrapbook Your Heart retreats together, and those of you that were ever part of that know that how amazing and amazing those were. And we had plans to do it again, do it better, do it different. So you know what? That's representative of that. Yeah, and just other little scraps of paper. I've mostly done kind of craft color, black color, and a little bit of purple, and just tear into different strips. Here's the purple. I'll tear some purple strips. And yeah, and think about how these represent some of your torn dreams. Okay, so I have lots of little torn pieces of paper now of different colors. By the way, I also grabbed some washi tape in those colors that I think will be kind of neat. I'll see if I can incorporate it in. Not sure yet because I've never done this before, but I'll let you know if that works out. But the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to adhere this down onto my base where the skirt is going to go. Just Mod Podge it down, and then I'm going to just take various strips and Mod Podge those down to form a really strippy dress skirt that represents, different ways that grief really tears at us. But when at the end, hopefully you can look at it and see something that's actually quite beautiful from the scars and the hurt of the grief. Finished the skirt here. I'm going to let it dry and then I can trim off the edges. But what I'm going to do now is, whoops. What I'm going to do now is attach my bodice that I cut out onto the base here and overlap it on the skirt there. Right, probably about there. So again, oops. See that little bit of gold? I found some an old gold sheet of paper that, I tore strips of. And I love that I incorporated that into her skirt there, just for a little bit of that hint of, it's royalty as well, but it's also going to draw in the crown when I put the crown on her head as well. So again, I'm going to color her afterwards. Just move that down there. And obviously the Mod Podge will draw clear. And I won't make you watch me, but I'll peel the back and cut this a little bit closer. I'm going to place the crown on her head. I'm going to Mod Podge the heart balloon up there, draw a little string, attach my the words that are on the sheet that speak to me. I gave you lots of different quotes and verses and even quotes from Shirley's book on there. So you just go through those and figure out what speaks to you, Mod Podge it down, and I will show you when this is done. All right, I think I'm done, but as you know, I sometimes go back and change things, but this is good for today. So here is my Dressed in Grief project and my girl with her. There is some royal purple and some gold. You can see the gold that shines in there. Her crown, the balloon that she is releasing, and I have Christy and Tammy's name in that. And yeah, and then just some of the quotes that spoke to me. the Psalm 23, the gift that God gave me minutes before finding out about Christy's passing. And I love this part here. God sees, God knows, and God loves. And that's what you have to hold on to in the midst of the dark. They call it the dark night of the soul. And if you have lived through grief, you understand that. I also have one of my favorite Bible verses. It's the shortest Bible verse in the entire Bible, and it is Jesus wept. So if you know me, I'm a crier. So that I just love that Jesus understands, and he went through such grief that we can't even fathom as well. And he wept as we weep. So Jesus knows what it is to walk the dark journey, the shadow of the valley of death and the dark night of the soul. Oh, the quote at the top is from Shirley's book. She actually ends the little black funeral dress with this quote. By the way, and it says 5 things I'd wish I'd known about grief. So this is a great resource. Get it for yourself. Buy it for anyone that you know that is going through a grief journey. It's got so much good information and comfort, and it's a really quick read, so it's not overwhelming. But the quote that I used of Shirley here is, "Death is merely a door from one life to another." And then I ended up with, at the bottom, always sign your name, but I am not broken, I am breaking through. And it has been, like I said, several years I've journeyed through the grief process with Christy. I will still have times where I am on the ground in tears. A song, a saying, or a piece of her artwork. This back here, we created together at a sleepover at her house. So I hope and pray that you are able to process your grief. We need to give space for it. And if you need any help, please reach out to me. And I know you could reach out to Shirley Thiessen as well. We are here to help and know that we love and care about you. And so does God love and care about you. And hopefully, as we're opening up here in Alberta, we're going to get to start being able to go back into the classrooms and teach and do workshops and into stores, into churches. So I invite you, if you'd like to do a workshop in person and gather a group of women together, please let me know. I would love to do that, and I am so anxious to start planning for that. Okay? Love you all.